Hello friends, myself Mr. Sagar Tukaram Kadlak from Gokhale Education Society's Arts, Commerce and Science College, Johar. Today in this video we are going to study about the natural selection topic, that is from the SYBSc Zoology paper first, semester 4, unit number 2. Now the natural selection, the various elements forces of the evolution brings about the variation in gene pool of its population. Every population tries to reproduce more progeny than the carrying capacity of its environment, leading to an overpopulation. The genetic variation induced in new phenotype of a population, of which some are useful and some are harmful. The phenotype which is usually for the organism or which is useful for the organism in an environment is called as the adaptation, and the genotype that is advantageous to that organism is said to be an adapted. So the individuals with better adapted genotype and phenotype to environment will produce compatible offspring or more number of offspring, as the subsequent generation will have more offspring with evolved characters or the evolved forms in it. And this, the process of the selection of betterment or better adapted character from the individuals or from the populations by the nature over a less period of time, it's called as the natural selection. That means the nature selects favorable genes and provides the opportunity to spread in the population. That is, nature selects such genes which is strong enough to be able that to be that individual will be able to survive in the environment or nearing habitat and having a more enormous kind of a characters. So this natural selection lead to shift the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium we discussed in last lectures. Now, as a natural phenomena, every population tries to produce more progeny than the carrying capacity of its environment, leading to the overpopulation. Due to this fact, the individuals with better adapted genotype phenotype will produce the compatible offspring, and if this continues, the population or the individuals with that habitat will be get overcrowded, and for this kind of problem the nature selects a favorable gene according to the environmental changes, and that leads to the selected number of individual will remain in a next generation or remain in a next time, that it will be helpful for the population to be get maintained according to the available sources. So the less adapted individuals reproduces very slowly, thereby lead to the decline in the number of individuals progressively, and leads to the existence of that genes or that individuals from the population. If a differential reproduction continues for the several generation, the gene of individual producing more offspring becomes prominent or predominant in the gene pool of that population. Now, if a particular selective gene will be continued in a population or in a generation to generation, that will lead to the same offspring having a dominant characters to the next generations, and this lead to the one same kind of dominant gene pool within the population. Now this process will totally disturb the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium that we can get from this diagram. So a triangle and a spherical shape kind of organisms in the general population, or we can call it the parental population, where a triangle shape having a 1 and the spherical having particular 10 individuals in a parental population. As the F1, F2, F3 and F4 next generations continues, the one gene or one individual having a triangle character or that gene is getting spread generation to generation, which is caused by a natural selection. And this kind of a differential selection or different kind of a selection carried by the nature called as the differential reproduction. So this lead to the dominant character in the population, and this kind of selection we can call as the natural selection. So this nature select three kind of processes to choose the individuals or the character or the gene within the population. Now we can simply describe it as the patterns of natural selection. There are three patterns by which the nature selects the individuals for the next generation or to continue their races. The first one is a stabilizing or a balancing selection. Second one is the directional, or we can call as the progressive selection, and the third one is disruptive selection. The first one, a stabilizing or a balancing balancing selection. As its title indicate that it stabilizes or balances some kind of genes or traits within the population. In this kind of a selection, the organism having extreme character are eliminated and the average characters are maintained. That means the different or the modified characters are eliminated, but the average character are maintained in the population. Thus, the group is formed in a homogeneous manner, and the individuals having the average characters are to be get formed as an homogeneous individuals. The rate of this kind of evolution is a very low, and if we can represent it graphically, it can give a bell-shaped curve. So this stabilizing selection we can simply understand by using this graph. If a frequency of individuals get increased, then at a mean period the mean character or average characters are remain in the population. We can see in the second graph which is continued, and the individuals having a extreme character which is shown near to 0 to 5 at the lower level. These lined area, marked area, are the characters which are extreme in that populations, which is eliminated in the next generation. As this kind of a process continues, then the mean characters or average characters are maintained within the population, and the extreme character are slowly get removed within population, so leading to the particular homogeneous form of the individuals or group of individuals. Now the second one is that directional or progressive selection. This is one kind of a selection that the population changes in the direction in which the environment has changed, or we can simply call as the population changes the direction according to the environment. So as the environment change, the organism modified or change their characters and will able to be survive in the particular habitat or the environment. As the environment changes continuously, the organism acquires new characters which is suited for that environment for the survival purpose. Okay. Now if the organism remain unchanged, which is get eliminated gradually from the population because of unable to get various kind of resources from that habitat or the environment, like as food, shelter, or the protection or the particular reproduction factors. So these particular are the resources which is get from the environment by the organism. So we can simply explain this directional or progressive selection by the example, like as a peppered moth. A scientific name of peppered moth is a Beston betularia. Then the second example is the antibiotic resistance in the bacteria, like as E. coli. Then the resistance to pesticide in various insects. If we consider an example of peppered moth, which exhibit a phenomenon of industrial melanism in the city of Manchester, Great Britain. In 1845, a light colored peppered moth inhabited to the clean environment of Manchester, but as the progressive industrialization was started in 1845 to 1898, the ultimate deposition of smoke and particles shoots to the that surrounding environment get turned into the black color. These changes in the environment threaten the moth, as on a black background the predator bird could easily locate a light colored moth, and therefore the number of moths which is light in a color get drastically declined. However, in this due course of time, the changes in environment induced mutation in the gene of that light colored moth responsible for the pigment formation in the moth. The mutant gene has started secreting a dark color pigment on a scale. Thus, that moth color get modified into the gray color, and that gray color get converted to the black one by a generation to generation. That means the mutation is get continues in generation to generation and leading to the dark black coloration in the moth. This further conceal that the surrounding were naturally protected from their enemies, or this pigmentation or change in the pigmentation of moth leading to the natural protection from their enemy. So this change in the color of paper moth according to the environment can gives an ultimate idea about the directional selection or a progressive selection. Now, a second one, the antibiotic resistance in bacteria. The E. coli is a bacterial strain found in the colon of a human. A scientist, Covelli and Maccaro, in 1952 experimentally proved that the E. coli developed an resistance to an antibiotic chloramphenicol about 250 times more than a normal bacteria. Now, how they can say this or prove that the bacteria get antibiotic resistance 250 times more than the normal one? Now, their experiment is like that. This chloramphenicol in the E. coli is acquired by mutant or the mutations and subsequently inherited to the next generation. Now this bacteria will able to get modified or mutated and develops the resistance according to the generation. Okay, this resistance strain of E. coli, if cultured in the chloramphenicol free medium, grows much more slowly than the susceptible ones, and this would lead to the development of the mutational gene in the E. coli and forms the resistance against the chloramphenicol chemical in the E. coli. So, if we can graphically represent this kind of a resistance in the E. coli, it gives a bell-shaped curve which will be seen in the next diagram. Now the third one example is that the resistance to pesticide. In agriculture, the insecticide are used to control the pest and do not include threaten or induce the 100% death of the large pest species. So thus it leads to the damaging or controlling the number of individuals or the number of pests or the number of insects of that species which is harmful for the crop will be very less. So those individuals that survive have become a pesticide resistance due to the frequent application of the pest or the pesticides chemical. Such resistance, the fly gives birth to the resistance progeny, or the individuals of the insect gives the young one having a resistance character. Thus, as their progenies or generation will continues in this continue contact with the pesticides, their generation or their progenies of the next generation will be having more and more resistance power to the pesticide. So if we draw this kind of directional selection in the graphically, it gives an idea that explains the individuals having a non-modified characters or non-acquired characters are get eliminated, and the mean character, modified character according to the environment are get selected by the nature. So it will gives a bell-shaped curve in the graphical representation. So this is the second type of selection called as the directional selection. Then third one is that the disruptive selection. In this kind of natural selection, the organism having extreme character are preserved and the organism has average characters are eliminated from the population. So if the individual have extreme character or rare characters are preserved and the average characters are eliminated. The nature or the natural selection breaks a homogeneous population into many adaptive forms and results in the balanced population. That means if the average character will be maintained, there will be a homogeneity in the population. But in this kind of disruptive selection, both kind of characters are get selected within the population, or we can simply call as the extreme character are selected in the population and leading to the balanced polymorphism within the population. This kind of selection is very rare and eliminate most of the member having an average character. So this selection produces two peaks in the distribution curve, which is seen like as shown in a diagram, where if frequency will be increased of the organism, the mean characters which is marked by lines are get eliminated into the next generation, and the organisms have the mean or average characters which is preserved for in the next generation, the young one generation. Then it produces the two peaks at a graphical representation and leading to the elimination of the average characters. So this is all about the natural selection and the patterns of natural selection. In this lecture we discuss about the natural selection, that means the individuals which get selected in the nature which having a better adapted for the particular habitat, and this kind of a selection called as the natural selection. Then we study about the patterns of natural selection. There are three patterns. First one stabilizing, second one is directional, and the third one disruptive one. In stabilizing, the organisms have the average characters are maintained in the population and the extreme characters individual are eliminated from the population, called as the stabilizing selection. It gives a bell-shaped curve. Then the second one is a directional selection. The environment having the individuals changes their characters as the environment is changed. Now in that we get the three examples. The first one is a papered moth. The scientific name of papered moth is based on Betularia. Then a second one, antibiotic resistance in the bacteria like E. coli, and the third one is the resistance to pesticide. These are the three examples from the directional or progressive selection. Then the third one is disruptive selection. In this kind of a selection, the extreme characters are preserved and the average characters are eliminated. So this is all about the natural selection and patterns of natural selection. Hope you get the total points and total knowledge about this natural selection. Thank you.